I'm Chris. I am the co-founder and MD of Hospital Records. We are based down in Tulse Hill, South East London. We've been down South East since 2004. So we started the company back in '96. Myself and my partner Tony Coleman started it just as a pair. We essentially really just started it because no one else was going to release our music, so we thought we'd better do it ourselves. And we didn't really have any plans or any great sort of vision. We just wanted an outlet for our music and our visuals, and it gradually just sort of evolved into something much bigger than that. We moved into premises in Forest Hill in South East London 2004. There were 5 of us when we moved in, and when we left 14 years later there were 22 of us. And there's now a full-time team of 35 based in our building down in Tulse Hill, where we have, on-site like warehouse, studio, office space, streaming room. We are label business and publishing business. We're also a fairly established event promoter. We have a booking agency called Clinic Talent. And yeah, I guess we've sort of just found ourselves almost like building our own kind of drum and bass ecosystem. I studied art and design at college, and I had no pretensions of working in the music business. I think I thought I was going to be a famous graphic designer. Back when I was at college, people like Neville Brody, Peter Saville, they were the kind of people that I looked up to. But they were, a lot of the design work that I was sort of fascinated by was record sleeves. I did have, as a kid and as a teenager, just a deep fascination with records and bands and music, and just a sort of a rambling, like evolving taste in music. But I studied art and design at college. I fully intended to try and pursue that as a career. But it was 92, so I graduated in 91, and in 92 I came back to London. I'd been studying in Yorkshire, and I was hoping to get a job at the ICA. I'd worked on some arts festivals, got some really good experience, worked in Madrid, and I just couldn't get a look in. No one was willing to take me on for anything other than kind of volunteering, and I very arrogantly thought, I'm not going to volunteer, I should just get a job. So I ended up, sadly, working at the Virgin Megastore on Tottenham Court Road, which was a pretty depressing job, just working on a till. But the best thing about it was every lunchtime I would just walk down into Soho and go record shopping, because back then Soho was just a thriving community of record shops. I started to pick up sort of bits of graphic design work. I was just doing flyers for people for nothing. I was designing carrier bags for record shops. Time Out used to be a big magazine in London. Time Out used to be like London's internet, and it was massive. And I used to design a lot of the black and white adverts for clubs and venues in the listings pages. And through that, I got to meet DJs and promoters, and that's actually how I met Tony, my business partner. Because at the time he had a band called Is It, who were quite a big deal on the kind of acid jazz scene, which was quite a thriving music scene. I mean, globally, particularly in London and the UK, late 80s, early 90s. And he would often play at places like Ronnie Scott's. And I found myself just kind of like laying out these ads and designs, including his band's name. And we met, we got introduced, and then he asked me to do a bit of design work for his record label. And then he asked me to run it. Bear in mind, his record label was, like a fax machine in his bedroom, but it sounded exciting. And so with no plan whatsoever, I ended up working with him. The acid jazz scene was kind of exploding, and even though we just had this tiny setup in his bedroom in Tottenham, there was a huge appetite for acid jazz music, particularly in Japan. and we were courted by 3 different Japanese record companies who wanted to do licensing deals with us. And these were the sort of glory days of the 90s industry. There was a lot of money flying around, obviously kind of really just pre-internet. And we ended up doing quite a substantial licensing deal for the label in Japan, which sort of got us out of that bedroom and into some nice premises in West London, where we took on a lease and took on an office and studio hire. And so then sort of 94, 95 seemed like really, really exciting, we're on our way, we're going to take over the world. But then in sort of early mid 95, the world of trip hop music kind of blew a hole through the acid jazz scene, because bands like Massive Attack and Portishead and Moax label just sort of turned that scene from what was a very it was based on live music and bands and like jazz, street soul, that kind of vibe. It just became a kind of headphone DJ producer thing, and it was exciting and it was great, but it kind of just thoroughly undermined what we'd built up, and we realised that suddenly we were finding it quite hard to sell records. We almost stopped working together. I actually got offered a job at Soul Jazz Records, which I was very close to taking, but Tony convinced me that we should just try and make music together and do something different. That was by far the first major kind of hurdle that we had to overcome, was maybe what we're doing isn't working anymore. What do we do now? And maybe because we were a lot younger then, and the pace of life was much slower because there was no internet to speak of really, and we kind of had the ability to really sort of turn around and just go in an entirely different direction. And we thought, basically this label and the music will live or die based on its own merits, not on, us doing interviews with magazines. Let's see if anyone likes it or not. And so, yeah, the second major hurdle was doing that's really hard. Because you have to be tremendously patient. You have to wait a long time. You have to just keep plugging away. And also, to be honest, we spent the first couple of years just holding down other jobs, because we weren't really making any money doing this. We had to really sort of spend a couple of years seeing if we would actually manage to pay the bills. And it did eventually kind of turn around. But I think in these sort of 26 years, once you realise that you've got something that may turn into a full-time business, you face all sorts of ongoing pressures, often which are financial, if you choose to be independent, which we always have done. It's quite a task to continually choose to reinvest the money that's coming in from the records back into the label, rather than have a holiday or buy a flat. You're just getting by, paying the bills and doing whatever it takes to keep relentlessly trying to actually evolve the company. And then I guess, outside of those sort of obvious ones, then maybe, piracy on the internet was a bit of a challenge. The way that essentially the music business was turned completely on its head by the internet, by file sharing, Napster, Pirate Bay, illegal downloading, the kind of collapse of physical product, which is what the industry was sort of based on. Then a la carte downloads, then shifting to streaming. There's a total crisis in the vinyl pressing industry right now. Which ones do you want to pick? So long as you're surrounded by smart people, you employ good people, you listen, you kind of embrace the challenges, you talk to your peers, your colleagues, your friends in the industry, and you keep learning, and you understand that you're never going to be the finished product. You're always going to be facing another range of massive challenges. Then, and hopefully you're relatively sensible with money, then I guess you should be all right. We realised that we needed, a way of trying to crystallise what this was and where's it going to go and how are you going to channel it. So naturally, we just spent a lot of time going to the pub, trying to come up with good ideas. Because we'd done the hard bit was the music bit, but then what's it going to be called? Who is it by? What's it going to look like? I actually found a piece of paper. I had this piece of paper with all of these generally crap ideas for record label names, and like at one point we were going to call it Odd Recordings because we're a bit obtuse and we do like puns and crap jokes. So we thought maybe if we called it Odd, we could then the first record could be called Odd One, and when it was released we could call it Odd One Out. So we thought that was really funny, but then we realised we couldn't really follow it up with much more than that. So we dropped that idea. But then, almost like by playing word association, at one point, and I don't know, I'm sure that we would both like to take credit for whose idea it was. But anyway, that word appeared on that list. And when we looked at it, suddenly all of the associated ideas just started pouring out, because you think, well, hold on, if you call your label hospital, what are you going to call your compilations? Well, you can call them plastic surgery or outpatients or ultrasound. And then what's the logo going to be? Well, if you're driving down a motorway anywhere in probably the world and you're looking for a hospital, it's usually an H. It's like a universal sort of symbol for it. So well, that's nice and easy, because then the logo is clearly an H. And then what would you do for packaging? Well, I guess, if it's clinical, it's going to be plain white. And okay, so then what's the association with that? I know you could probably put lots of records kind of have sleeve stickers in the top right corner. Well, instead of doing like standard stickers, why don't you go to a pharmacist and like the little wraparound stickers that have your name and address on when you get your prescription medicine? Why don't we get those? And so I got this guy, his company's called CG Agencies in Harrow, and he made us boxes of these stickers in different colours. So we had it just said hospital with the address, and there was a logo and a little colour strip down the side. So we did them in red and yellow and blue and green, and he'd send us boxes of these things. And I had an Apple image writer, which would be attached to an Apple Mac Classic, and it's a dot matrix printer, and you'd feed these stickers into the printer onto the little kind of spokes that go into the holes, and you clamp it down. Almost like a typewriter, and it would and then it would take ages to kind of set this all up, because it's really old, very early sort of computer technology, and we'd diligently print off these stickers. I guess we just sort of felt that when that word came up on that list, that we suddenly, everything just fitted into place for us creatively and visually, and we kind of, and lots of those ideas that were then listed underneath, we've done those compilation series, we've done outpatients, we've done ultrasound, we've done plastic surgery, we've done sick music, etc, etc, etc. One sort of artist album that's maybe one of my favourites is now almost 20 years old, came out in 2003, by an act called Scientific. It's called Ghetto Blaster. I think specifically just because musically it felt very much of its time. It was at a time when I guess there were a lot of different strands in the music scene that I work in, and things were starting to really sort of open up, rather than being very sort of rigid in, you either make that kind of sound or this sort of sound and that's kind of it. And Scientific then were a duo who were very, very experimental, sort of a lot of sort of techno influence, hip hop influence, and just it's one of the albums on the catalogue that when I listen back to it, I find it really exciting listening to it. That can be quite difficult, particularly in dance music. Dance music can age quite quickly, and also, drum and bass is a good example of a genre that that moves on at a rapid pace, like it really, really does. There are some things that are quite consistent, and there are always kind of throwback moments, but it's continually kind of evolving sort of sonically. It got faster, the tracks got shorter, certain artists became, pop acts, stadium acts. But that record is something that is just, and actually also as it happens, it was the only record they ever made as a duo. Then John ended up continuing with the artist's name as a solo producer. But that was just a great moment for me. We've done a lot of compilation projects over the years. And I don't know, maybe, like I picked it up the other day, like the first sort of significant compilation we made was called Outpatients, and it was a quadruple vinyl. I think we did two 12 inches, a 10 inch and a 7 inch, just to be obtuse, just because we thought that'd be complicated. It was also musically quite diverse, and so that it involved some drum and bass, some kind of deep house, some hip hop, and there's a very seminal track by the late Marcus Intellects on that album called Taking Over Me, which is a really amazing piece of kind of techno breakbeat. I'm really, really proud of that. It felt like a fairly adventurous project to do at the time. And now increasingly, the older I get, it's quite nice. I met someone the other day down in Brixton at Brixton Village who was telling me how much he loved that compilation. Now, admittedly, he's probably my age, in his mid-50s, but still, he said that that was a seminal moment for him, and which really, really means a lot. Music is essential to me because it's really the oxygen that gets me through each day. If I stop and think about it, I don't really do anything without listening to music, unless I'm watching a film. When I get up in the morning to make a cup of tea and have breakfast, the first thing I would do is put on a speaker and choose something to listen to. In travelling down here, I wouldn't make any journey without headphones. I'd feel quite anxious if I had to endure any journey, let alone a tube journey or a train journey in London without headphones. That would drive me nuts. I think also, I recognise the older that I get that there are so many songs that are highly evocative to me and real triggers for me around certain times of my life. Hard times, good times, particular people, particular moments. It's funny. I met a guy a few years ago, I think at a conference, he said to me, I don't really listen to music. And I just sort of looked at him and just thought, sorry, what? What does that even mean? Oh, well, no, I'm sort of more into sport and like gaming and you don't listen to music. I mean, there's someone that you just can't trust, right? I don't know how you can be around someone that says that, because there must be something deeply wrong with them. I think it's, I know that a lot of us probably feel the same way, but really it's like, music should be the soundtrack to our lives.